Hey, Shinder here on Drum Talk TV with yet another first-time offender. This has been a great year of first-time guests, and I am honored and excited to introduce Burleigh Drummond, who, if you're not familiar with Burleigh, you're going to get to know so much. He's been the drummer of Ambrosia on all releases. No big deal considering they only put out 2 albums. No, I'm kidding. This goes all the way back to 1970. They've had 5 top 40 hit singles from 75 to 80, plus a bunch of top 20 hits. And Burleigh and his wife, Mary Harris, formed the band Tin Drum in the 90s, released 3 albums, and they got married in 1983. 41 years of marriage between musicians. We'll talk about that for sure. That's a feat in itself, bigger than all those singles. But they performed together on stage with Ambrosia and with Tin Drum. And Burleigh has performed and recorded with everybody from Frank Zappa, of course, Ambrosia, Alan Parsons, Los Angeles Philharmonic. What a nice, well-rounded career. But one of his favorite things ever is now the Emerson Street album. In fact, you know what? Let me just put this album cover up really quick. It's a family thing. Tin Drum family band. Let's talk about that first, Burleigh, and welcome. And thanks for taking time to get with me. Talk about how this album came apart and how is it working with family? I mentioned to you our producer is my son, Steve, the youngest of our combined 11 kids. So far, it's working out. How's it been with you working on this album with your family?
Well, Dan, first of all, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely.
And so, yes, it's a product of COVID. It's one of the good things for me that came out of COVID because my daughter, the lower there on the right, was in the Peace Corps in Thailand and, came home for a wedding and then couldn't go back because of COVID.
Oh.
And my son and his family, he came off the road and we got stuck. So anyway, the whole family got stuck here. And so what evolved was I started hearing these songs that my kids had written. Both my son and my daughter had become writers, while they were away from us, from mom and dad. And they came home and these just great songs. So over the course of a couple of years, we started recording, and finally we had enough for an album. And so
that's awesome.
and Emerson Street is the home that I'm still in, where they grew up and where they had their piano lessons and where they
wow,
and all their schooling and first attempts at recording and right. So that's why it's called Emerson Street, because that's where
it's such a great namesake, especially being a family project. And I love how you unfolded that. 41 years of marriage with Mary, both musicians. Shed some advice, wisdom, and like angelic light on that situation. How does one make that work?
Contrition.
Or 2.
Just contrition every day. I'm sorry for. But it was Ambrosia had stopped playing in around 83, late 82, 83. And taking a break. Dave Pack was going to do a solo album, which took too long, and we finally got back together in 90. And when we got back in that period, my Mary's cousin, John Wood, a great guitar player, was renting a room for me. And he asked me, hey, let's play. Excuse me. So he goes, my cousin Mary's coming from Three Rivers, California. She was a big fish in a little pond. And she... Excuse me.
That's okay.
So she comes and we set up in my living room and I had to awkwardly get around her to get into a room of some kind. And we kind of squared off and that was it. That was it.
That's great.
It was really love at first sight. And I had to clean up, a few things, but after that, it's been good sailing for 41 years, 42, actually, I think coming up. So
that's awesome.
Yeah. And it's, there's ups and downs, of course, but you just got to apologize when it's time to apologize. And,
when it's my turn someday, I will.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah. I mean, it's very rare, very rare. But
Now, when she came from Three Rivers, California, were you in LA? And I grew up in LA. I'm not there now, but I grew up in LA in the San Fernando Valley. Were you in LA at that time? And is that where you've been all this time?
Well, yes, I was. We were in Sylmar. We lived in Sylmar first, and then moved. We bought our first house in Panorama City, the garden spot of the valley.
Yeah.
And then finally, we're out here now in Thousand Oaks, out in
okay.
Valley. Yeah,
Great. Very familiar with all those areas. In fact, our producer Steven's mother, my son Steve, and Alex, their mom, lived in the Sylmar Panorama City area when we first met and everything.
Right.
And they're still out. She's back in that area. And I lived in Ventura, California for 15 years after the Northridge earthquake. I was in Canoga Park for that. And that was the last straw. I got out of the valley. I had been through the Sylmar earthquake, then many little ones. The Northridge earthquake was the final freaking straw.
It's been quiet since then, fairly,
That's knock on whatever, right? Yeah.
Right. With that said, it'll probably happen tomorrow, but
now it's interesting because I was going to ask you if you're originally from LA and grew up there, but in our pre-show talk, you mentioned when we were talking about darbukas and music from that region, you were a military brat and you grew up in part of Turkey.
Yes, I mean my father was a full colonel in the army, and so we move every 2 years, because that's what the military does, And so we ended up in Ankara, Turkey, so I was there about 3.5 years, and that's actually where not the enlightenment, where the moment happened for me, where that first rush of percussion. I was at a bazaar with my mom. I think I was like maybe 7 or 8, and I wandered off and I wandered into the back of this tent because I heard this hammering happening, and there was about 6 guys in a big circle sitting on the ground with those big, huge copper plates, and they were spinning it and hammering it. And the synchronicity of it I just stood there for my mom said I was missing for a couple hours, but I was just like, oh my gosh, this is the most, intense thing I've ever seen. And ever since.
How old were you? About how old were you, Burleigh?
About 8,
okay.
Like that, 8. And, and so ever since then, I've been trying to make music by hitting things,
Yeah. Well, it's worked for you. You're getting the hang of it. Speaking of which, I want to show a quick video for everybody. And then I want to talk about your style and some influences, because one of the things I noticed when I saw this video, and folks, it's shot on a smartphone. It's a little boomy, but you'll hear the rhythm. For me, it has a very tribal feel to it. And I know a lot of people might take that for granted, like drums, duh, no kidding, but not all playing is like that, right? So let's watch this clip and then talk about music for a little bit. I just love how you get that ostinato going, and then you're playing other stuff over the top of it. It sounds like 9 people playing.
Well, there's several people playing cowbells.
Yeah.
And that's an acha pattern from Ghana. That when I went to UCLA, I was lucky enough to study African music with a master drummer, Kwasi Badu from Ghana. And so, how they do all these interlocking patterns.
Yeah.
To make a composition. And so that was the band Ambrosia, my wife on lead cowbell, by the way. And so everybody's playing these interlocking parts, and that allows me to solo over the top of it, check back into the, the main theme, come, back and forth. So yeah, that's a lot of fun to do. Yes.
That's awesome. So you got bit by the bug first at about 8 years old, living in Turkey.
Yeah.
Who were some of your influences in the Western influence of music in your life as you started to really dive into becoming a musician and a drummer?
Well, I was a lot of kind of strange, fortunate things happened for me. I mean, of course, I was affected by the Beatles and everything like that, you know, in the first rush of. So my father and mother had broken up, and my father would send this driver to pick me up to come visit him on occasion. You know, it's about an hour trip each
Mm.
way, and the driver was a guy named Jack who was an extreme jazz buff. So,
Oh,
and back to when LA had a great jazz radio station. So everything, you know, for 2 hours on each of those trips, I would be educated, you know, in Coltrane and Miles and Sonny Stitt.
oh,
It went on, and that was probably a huge. I mean, Elvin Jones in particular, you
oh
know,
yeah.
and he would name all the players for me and who was playing and you know where they came from and who they were with before and where they went after and you know and like what their style was and that was just, I mean, even though I was young, I think I was maybe you know, sixth, seventh grade, that period. That was just like, you know, a huge education for me, you know. Uh,
Yeah.
and and then of course, you know, I started playing and of course in high school, you know, Blood, Sweat and Tears, Cream. I mean, I was a huge fan of Cream, you know, Mitch Mitchell.
Hmm.
And what's funny, I mean, later on I got to study with a guy named Freddie Gruber, who's
Oh yeah.
infamous drum teacher. And
Yep.
so I would go to my lessons and without, you know, there was a period when I go to my lessons and without fail, uh, uh, Jim Keltner would be there with Mitch Mitchell
Oh
watching
wow.
watching me take my lessons. And, you know, it was very unnerving because it's like, you know, two of my idols sitting there watching me take a drum lesson.
Yeah, no pressure, right?
Yeah, but it was great. It was great. And Freddie was, of course, you know, very, very wise in his drum teaching. So,
That's
yeah.
awesome. Was he in Encino yet at that time?
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
that's where he lived. Yeah.
Oh,
Or,
that's awesome. Gosh, there's so much in there. What I love about Driver Jack, if I may call him Driver
yeah,
Jack,
yeah.
he gave you the history of the different players and where they played before. That is so important because a lot of people, especially I think newer musicians, not just drummers, but other musicians, they get locked into who their influence is and they get locked into what they play without looking back at, well, where did they come from and what were their influences? People like Nico McBrain of Iron Maiden, who was broke on the Beatles, who his sister and a friend took him to when he was a kid.
Yeah.
And you would never equate that with the music he listens to. And if you look at John Bonham and some of the things he did, and you look at Max Roach, he got that from Max Roach, a lot of that stuff.
Right.
And it's so important to look back at those older players because people like Mitch Mitchell, Ginger Baker, John Bonham, Keith Moon, they didn't have rock role models. They were all jazz followers and whatnot, and they morphed the music into what we now know. And I think a lot of, especially the further we go on in generations,
Right.
younger players don't realize that. They think, well, there was always rock music, but it
Yeah,
wasn't.
right. Yeah. I mean, in fact, it was quite a controversy when they stopped swinging the beat, you know, and started playing straight.
Yeah, the
You
2
know,
and 4 and 4 on the floor type stuff.
yeah, right. And but I think, I mean, I've been for what it's worth, some people have told me a lot that even when I play rock and roll, there's a swing element in it, or
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
everything I play has and I kind of credit that because to Driver Jack because he, you know, that was such a huge, you know, influence to me that, you know, I always have a bit of that in me when I play anything, even straight beats. It has a swing
Yeah.
to it.
And there's a lot of it in one of my favorite songs on your new album, and that's the song Mom.
Oh yeah.
It's a total swing beat.
Yeah, well, totally. Yeah, that's the song my daughter wrote about my wife, Mary,
Right.
and yeah, it's a kind of it's an interesting story. It's about you know, some women not getting the credit they deserve for their contributions. It's like, and
Yeah.
So,
Which is crazy that in 2028 or whatever year we're in, that's still the case quite often.
Yeah, no, I know. It's ridiculous. I mean, there's so many things about society. Prejudice. How can prejudice still exist?
Yeah.
How can wars exist? I mean, we haven't outgrown that. I mean, it's like, yeah.
And none of the reasons have changed. It's the same old story.
Right.
But I also want to remind everybody, if you read the text in the post, wherever you're seeing this, whether you're seeing it live or on the archive, there's a link there where you can get this new album. It's a great collection of music, 12 tracks. A lot of fun to listen to. I'm really excited to see where this goes. Are you folks going on tour as a family?
We're starting to get a few offers coming in. I mean, I'm not the greatest promo man, so I'm catching up on all that. I'm much more comfortable sitting in the studio.
Right. At the drum kit or the console.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I might be able to hook you up with Ambrosia if you want to open for them.
Oh, well, that'd be great. Thank you. That'd be very nice. Yeah.
Talking about lessons, Burleigh, I want to ask you, with all these other people you've played and recorded with, Alan Parsons, Mighty Mo Rogers, Dave Mason, Frank Zappa, the Los Angeles Philharmonic, Alan Parsons, can you cite a couple very memorable takeaways that you got working with any of those different individuals and how you perpetuated what you learned from them in your music or as a producer or a writer or as a drummer?
Well, okay. I would say that, the best thing you can do to a song is not so much based on technique, although technique helps you get there. It's the feel. I mean, you've got to provide a feel, because the feel will win the day. I mean, you may not be perfect technically, and you may not have the most amount of chops, but if you can make it, first, somebody explained it to me once. The connection is really between the drums and the melody. Like, so that, say in rock or popular music, it's the drummer and the voice. In jazz, it's the drummer, the trumpet, or whoever's playing. And if you can make that person feel really good when they're singing, you're doing your job. That's the ultimate goal to me, is the ultimate feel.
That's awesome.
Now, a lot of things that Freddie Gruber showed me, especially, with certain releases, that helped me find, like, to me, that helped me find a feel, especially on that 16th note thing, that kind of feel.
Yeah.
In fact, I was so consumed with that at one point that, I mean, I wouldn't stop playing it. I think Ambrosia wrote 6 songs with that beat, like Living on My Own, Biggest Part of Me, Dancing by Myself. All those songs came out of me just relentlessly playing that beat ad nauseum, to the band.
And it's a beat that's so easy to accidentally make it feel and sound rigid, but there's technique to it. Like you said, it's all about the feel.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's awesome. What did you do with the LA Philharmonic? I'm not clear on the work you did with them. Was it before Mary took over cowbell? You were playing cowbell with them?
Well, yeah. I was still in. Going to UCLA, and 2 of my teachers were in the LA Phil, and Mitchell Peters, and sorry, it's been a long time, but so when I graduated college, or right before I graduated college, they started recommending me as auxiliary percussion. So I wasn't like, one of the 4 main percussionists, but when they do like something that demanded auxiliary percussion, I'd get a call and come in, and it was great. But the biggest revelation to me was, when I was up there, and of course I'm a little nervous and, counting every bar, and I kind of look over at my, my comrades there on the percussion section, and I thought, because when I was sitting out in the audience, I said, man, they're looking at that music so intently, and then up there they're reading books, because they know the music, and if they got 5 minutes before they play again, they're reading a magazine, and
that's hilarious. I love that. That's funny. I'm sure there were quite a few takeaways from that gig, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, as you know, there's so much technique for every percussion instrument. So it's like, I mean, being a percussionist is like, that's a 24-hour a day thing, to keep up on that.
Yeah.
I used to play a lot of mallets in Ambrosia, like marimba and on the early albums.
Yeah.
But it's like if I got called from a marimba session now, it's like I'd probably stand on the wrong side of the marimba to start with until I figured out,
That's funny. Could you give a little history lesson on Ambrosia going from we're vying to get a record deal to getting that record deal, and what was the tipping point and the process? How did that come about? And then how did you guys know that, okay, I think we've made it, quote, made it?
Oh, well, okay. So when we started out, we started in 1970. We started playing together, and we knew we were a band just the first time we met together. The three other members were together. Their drummer left because he got a girl pregnant, and that was the end of his drumming career. Yep. And so they found my name in the musician's contact service, my little 5x3 card that I put up for $5.
Oh,
and
wow.
So they came over to my house. I was living with my mom. I was still like a freshman in college, I think is when we met. And just talking to each other, we became a band. And then the first time we played in Joe Puerta's parents' living room, our first song lasted like an hour and a half. It's just like
awesome.
So we knew we knew that combination of people meant something. So we were influenced by everything, especially bands like Traffic, you name it. There was
you can hear it in the music for sure.
Yeah, one guy was especially Beatles, one guy was especially the Stones. The keyboard player, Chris North, was blues, and I was the ethnic guy, the ethnic and the jazz guy. And, but we all shared everything, especially bands like King Crimson and Yes.
Oh, nice.
And, and so at first we were playing much more proggish stuff, although we did everything, country, you name it, we did it. And so, but we were the worst club band in the world. because the whole thing was, so we'd start off on a dance tune or something that was danceable, but then the Tony Williams fever would get in there, and it would end up going so far outside that, inevitably the owner would go, you guys sound great, but it's not working.
It's not selling drinks or getting people on the dance floor. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So one day we were at the Hollywood Bowl auditioning a sound system for the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh, wow.
A friend of ours had a sound system, and he was vying to get it placed in the Hollywood Bowl. So we went to be the band to show it off. And the chief recording engineer for London Decca, classical, a guy named Gordon Perry, saw us and just thought we were, cat's meow. We thought we're great. So he started, peddling us around, and we met but it was a different crowd. It was like every classical conductor in the world, and hung out with them. But finally we got an audition at A&M, and we went in and we cut 3 demos and 3 songs. And so unfortunately, Herb Alford and A&M, they passed on us. But
wow.
Another guy, one of the engineers, was playing our songs in the studio he was working at. And the owner of the studio came in, heard the music, and took it to Russ Regan at 20th Century Fox.
Wow.
And he gave us our first deal on 20th Century Fox, which Alan Parsons was on that label, and Barry White and people like that. So we did 60 demos for our first record, everything from country to pop to everything.
Wow.
But there was a couple of songs like Nice Nice and Mama Frog, the progressive stuff. And when he came in, he listened to it all, and he gave us praise on all of it. But what he said was, listen, I have the country and I have the pop. He goes, what I don't have is the progressive that you're doing. So,
nice. He knew he needed to fill certain slots in a portfolio, and you guys fit that empty slot.
And he says, you're the only guys I know that can do that. Can you do that for me? And so, that gave us free license. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So that's how we went down that path. Yeah. I mean, we were a progressive band, but we weren't like chops for chops sake. We were
Right.
still we were a very melodic band, and everything we did we felt had to serve the song,
Yeah.
to an extent. And luckily we had songs that allowed us to get proggy on.
Yeah.
And so that
That's
went on. Yeah, that went on for a couple albums, and then all of a sudden, this is an interesting side of the story. At night, to make enough money, because budgets go to the studio, they go to everywhere except the artist.
right.
So we played in a female gay bar at night, which was one block from the studio, to eat.
Yeah.
And so we were doing that 4 or 5 nights a week, and then we'd be in the studio all day, and then we go play the bar at night. And they wanted R&B. They wanted, so we played R&B, all night. And then, but you start digesting what you play.
Yeah.
And so those styles started creeping into our writing, and then all of a sudden, How Much I Feel shows up, and Biggest Part of Me, and
Big hits.
Yeah. So the R&B started coming back out of us into the writing. And yeah, so that's what happened. Yeah. And so
that's really neat.
And it was a big debate, like when How Much I Feel showed up, because on that same album we have Life Beyond LA, that's kind of proggish.
Yep.
And How Much I Feel, you would think those two wouldn't go together.
Right.
But, so there's a big debate on, are we ruining our career by having How Much I Feel, even though we knew it was going to be a hit. Is it? But it did have a different effect. Although we had AM success with that, it kind of took us out of the arena, because that's where young males go to see a prog band.
Right.
Opening for Rush and people like that.
Yeah.
And it put us more into the nightclub. Where it was more young girls all of a sudden than young guys. It's like How Much I Feel, Biggest Part of Me.
Yeah.
So there was for a period, it felt like we were living in two camps. We were living in two worlds. But nowadays, it all seems to work together for some reason. I mean, Nice, Very Nice, and Somewhere I Never Traveled, aren't a mismatch for How Much I Feel and Biggest Part of Me. It just is good music. So,
absolutely. Even your current album, which I'll show here for those who didn't see the beginning, there's a nice, when I use the word eclectic, I don't mean all over the place. There's a nice variety of music. And like producer Steven says, there's very soothing music on this album, but it's not all the same. There's still a nice variety, which is great. And folks, there's a link in the post where you can get the album recorded by the family. But when you recorded that first Ambrosia album, Burleigh, remind me, please, who produced it?
Well, our official titled producer was Freddie Pirro, who was also our manager. And but it was pretty much self-produced by the band.
Okay.
I mean, everything we did was always self-produced by the band. I mean, if no matter what a producer said, if the band wasn't in agreement, it wasn't going to happen. So, and I really do have to give credit to the members of the band. I mean, Dave Pack, Joe Puerta, Chris North, they're stellar. I couldn't work with better musicians and writers. I was very fortunate.
That's awesome. I heard their drummer's pretty good too.
No,
because your band is only as good as your drummer. You know that, right?
I know that for sure.
Right. Do they know that? I'm sure they do. So given the styles of music that people know you for, what are, and you mentioned, living in Turkey, but along with that, what are some styles of music you enjoy listening to and or playing that people might be surprised by or be a bit outside of what they know you for? Are there any? Like, are you secretly emo polka river dance guy or banjo music? Are you a big Steve Martin banjo fan? What are some things outside your own area that might surprise people?
Well, I really can't say there's an area of music that I don't appreciate it. I mean, of course, I have a huge jazz influence, and I have a huge ethnic influence, which includes, not just African and and the Middle Eastern, but also Irish and Celtic and all.
Mm.
I love all that stuff. I wasn't so tuned in to a lot of country, although I appreciate country and Americana. But my kids, my Burleigh Jr. and Sierra, they have played me so much great Americana music that I'm a huge fan now. And
Interesting.
yeah, and in fact, it's probably affected my writing now too. And they are very influenced by it. So yeah,
That's great. So you mentioned that you're getting some offers to go on tour as the Tin Drum Family band, but what's happening with Ambrosia? Are you guys recording? Are you putting something out? Is a tour planned there as well?
Ambrosia is like kind of more in the weekend warrior kind of thing where we maybe
fly out gigs.
Yeah, we do fly gigs, and we may do a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, or 3 days, and then come home. I don't think we'd be opposed to a tour, but it would have to be, at this age, it would have to be comfortable.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, for all the members involved, so it's like, but we still, I mean, I think Ambrosia is sounding better now than it ever has.
Oh, that's awesome.
And what's interesting too, I mean, it's how, you go through how the world goes through musical stages to this whole new appearance of yacht rock.
Right.
Yeah. It's like, we have done so many of those shows, and now we do a lot of shows where we do our hits, but we also back up all, 3 or 4 artists like Peter Beckett of Player, and I'm really kind of proud of our band because I think we're one of the few bands that we've been able to back up Michael McDonald quite a few times, Christopher Cross,
that's cool,
Dave Mason, you name it. I mean, we've never shied away from a situation to play with somebody else.
That's great. Yeah, more exposure, more influence. Yeah,
and I really like that. I really, because back in the day, I mean, bands didn't intermingle so much.
Right.
You were in your band. That was your it. And now it's like, I can play on some of my contemporaries' albums, and I can tour with them. And if they need a drummer, I can go sit in. Whatever, it's good. And I love that.
That's cool. That's cool. I have an Ambrosia clip here. Let's pull this up. It'll just take me a sec. If I can get to the right button. There we go. All right. Check this out, folks. So cool. There's that beat you were talking about earlier, and it's such a classic sound. But one of the biggest, I think, stamps on the sound of Ambrosia is the backup vocals and the arrangements and everything. Just fill it out, and you just recognize it right away.
Yeah, we were big. Well, I think we got a lot of that from the Beach Boys. They were a huge influence vocally. But yeah, it's always been a staple in Ambrosia. I mean, we cut all the tracks. I mean, this is the drummer's dilemma in a band. You cut all the tracks in a week or 2 weeks, and then you spend 4 months on the vocals.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's great. So now this brings us to the Burleigh Drummond Fun Fact segment.
Okay.
And my question for you is, give us a peek behind your curtain, if you don't mind. What do you like to do that is completely removed from music. In that sliver of time, you have some time to do something where you're not writing, recording, producing, gigging. What do you like to do outside of music?
You know, much to my wife's chagrin, I go out into my yard for an hour. I try to put an hour every day in my yard, and I'm a big weed puller.
Oh, really?
No,
well,
I mean,
better than saying you're a big weed smoker, I guess,
no,
or I don't know, maybe not.
Oh, maybe the combination would work. I don't know, but no. I mean, I just like to be I like to be in the yard.
You know what? That's my jam. That is what keeps me off the news. I grow flowers. We do container. My wife kills plastic plants. I do container gardening because our whole yard is concrete.
Oh,
and I built these terraces out of pallets. So I can totally dig that.
Oh,
no
man,
pun intended.
I love it. I mean, when I'm about pulling weeds, I actually am fascinated with weeds, how many different kinds of weeds they are and where they come from. And, you know, how does that, you know, how did one patch of land last year have this certain kind of weed and now it has a different kind of weed this year? You know, it's like, what is that? You know?
And so many of them have medicinal values as well. There's this one weed that grows that we have so much of with these little yellow flowers. It's called London Rocket, and you can literally cut it up and eat it in a salad.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fun to look them up. I have an app called Plantum, Plantum, and I just take a picture of any kind of plant, and it identifies it, gives me the history of it, the care of it. It's just amazing. So I'm constantly going around taking pictures. It's fun.
Oh, that's great. I want to get that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I just like to be in the yard. I like to walk around. You know, it's fun.
That's cool.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I want to implore folks to check out this great album. Lots of fun. Burleigh Drummond with his family, the 10 Drum Family Band, his wife, Mary, Sierra, his daughter, Burleigh Jr., and it's all a wonderful assortment of different kinds of music, different generational influences, I think would be fair to say, right, Burleigh?
Absolutely, yes.
And there's a link right there in the post for you to get that and enjoy some new music, which is really cool. Thanks for bringing the world some new music that is fresh and not dated and just sounds wonderful. It really is a great album.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for taking time to join us. And folks, thank you for taking time to join Burleigh Drummond and myself, Dan Shinder, here on Drum Talk TV. And stay tuned to a lot more stuff coming up. And Burleigh, hang on the line with me after we say goodbye to the audience. And folks, we will see more interviews, more of our original series, more of our silly memes, and more videos from you folks, our fans from over 100 countries. Thanks so much, everybody.